There's something beautiful about the emotion we call love. We're on a mission to find out more about how it affects every being. It all starts with perception. What if our perception of the world and its many inhabitants expanded? Every being has a different vantage point. When we truly know a soul, we find solace. Asking questions with an open mind and heart is how we learn how to relate to one another. Relational healing goes beyond the surface level. When we listen to someone on a deeper level, we fear less and love more. We're all teachers. Every being on this planet has a gift that is meaningful to share. This podcast is about expanding our vision and illuminating the threads that weave us together as a community. Simply put, this podcast is about the lessons in love we learn along the way and our journey of being our true self. Welcome to Unified Threads.
Yeah, so Samanvay means a group of people coming together to do something, like on a project, or like actually Samanvay means to come together to work for common good.
This is Amy, a co-creator of this podcast, here with Megha. Megha and I recorded this interview that you'll hear today about 4 months ago in October of 2019, and it's now February 2020, so we've been slowly trusting the process and just making sure it was the right timing for this episode to come out. And it's been about a year since Megha and I met as well, so it felt like great timing to release this. Megha is with us now, and we just wanted to find out, is there anything that you wanted to add to the episode, since it has been a few months, about what you've been learning since then, and then we'll get into our interview.
Hi, Amy. Nice talking to you here.
Nice to hear from you too.
So I'm currently in Karnataka, and last time we recorded in Rajasthan. So it's two different states, yeah.
And has anything new happened? Any new realizations come to you since this interview?
Yeah, I think I have tried to understand myself as a practitioner a lot, and I've been trying to understand how I can work on the ideas that I shared last time, but I'm also realizing that I think on ground it's very different, because I have also gone for some different community work, and there I've realized that on ground it's very different, and what I read in the books, in the documentations, it's very different. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how we can make it to bridge the gap.
Well, that's exactly what this episode is all about. And the title, Samanvay, as we just heard, working as a group of people, is what we decided to call this episode, since that is what it seems like a lot of your passion is driven by, is helping to learn how to work better in community, or how to create systems that really center livelihood and the importance of us taking care of each other. So is there anything else you want people to know about why we named the episode Samanvay?
I just remember one conversation that happened, I think 2 weeks ago, that I would like to add for now, which will be a great insight. Two of my friends were talking about how they think all the NGOs have started working towards the corporate side, which is good to adopt a systematic approach, but then actually how gaps are again being built up between the community people and the NGOs, like the individuals who were working for the people on ground.
And for the listeners that might not be as familiar with what NGO means, that's non-governmental organization. And here in the US, they're often called nonprofits or 501c3s. So thanks for sharing that very important point. And yeah, let's just get into the interview, and you'll hear more about how we met in the next audio clip. So thank you for joining us again. Happy 2020. We look forward to talking to you and hopefully those other people you're working with later this year for more episodes.
Yes, definitely. I will be waiting to talk to you and listen to this podcast out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And if anybody wants to get in touch with us about the work that Megha is involved with, definitely reach out through unifiedthreads.com. And here we go.
I like people to call me Megha. Yeah.
Megha and I met when I was visiting a project in the social sector in Rajasthan, India, where Megha was working on her thesis project in regards to livelihood for her design college. And then on my way back out of the project, we decided to share a cab to the next place we were going. And her hometown was on the way, or one of the places she grew up. And we were just getting to talking about system thinking and other aspects of just working in the world and what we're passionate about. And that's really what connected Megha and I more on kind of like a soul heart level of being interested in similar topics. And so we decided to meet again and had some conversations about the various systems and organizations we've both been to. And that's what inspired me to invite her to be a part of this project, because we definitely have a lot in common. So thanks for joining us, Megha. We're really happy you're here.
Thank you, Amy, for having me here too. It's really great to meet you and like talk to you about different things.
Well, I feel the same.
It's good to have you.
You have inspired me in a lot of ways. We talked a lot about like bottom-up approaches and kind of growing from the roots, new systems that are more holistic and that involve more nurturing of everyone involved. And so I wondered if you might tell us a little bit about your story and your roots, where you came from and where you currently live.
Yeah, so I belong to Ajmeer, which is a city in Rajasthan state in India. Like I've been brought up in Ajmer, and I've originally belonged to a state called Uttar Pradesh in India. So like there are two different like states about which I know, and then after that, like for my education, I have traveled to different cities. So yeah.
And your family roots, you said, are from Uttar Pradesh and are now live in Rajasthan. Is that right? And
so my father is an engineer, so he had a job in Rajasthan. That's why he settled in Rajasthan, while my grandparents is still like have roots there, and they used to stay there in Uttar Pradesh.
Okay. And what made you decide to study in other areas? Like, I know you went to a design college, I believe, in Bangalore. And for those of us that are not as familiar with the geography of India, can you explain a little bit about just how, really it's so many different cultures. It's not like one area is the same as the next, and how you decided where you wanted to study?
Yeah, it's, I think it's more about how many like where do we get access to what kind of education. Like India is so huge, and there are so many like different culture, and you always want to learn different culture, and you want to like experience different things. It's not like what is there in Rajasthan is really different than what is in Uttar Pradesh, and like Bangalore is in Karnataka. So like what is like the education system is very different there. So so when I wanted to pursue designing, I realized that like the colleges, everything like the education system is much better there. That's why I like went there and pursued designing there. Whereas like for my undergrad, I was doing engineering, and that I could do in Rajasthan itself because I could find decent colleges in Rajasthan.
And what exactly did you study there? And what have you been learning about from that since with the projects you've been to?
Yeah, so I did industrial designing there in Bangalore from Srishti Institute, and like the industrial design course is about like making of products. It can also include textiles and furniture, but my journey has been like very different as a design student also. I've been like motivated to work towards community and like most of my projects have been in the craft sector with the people for the people. So yeah, like designing has like given me a different perspective about like how on a larger perspective we can apply these ideas rather than just making. of products.
And I know one of the things that we connected about when I was there also is about self-learning and being self-taught, self-directed education when it comes to looking at how people are getting into that work. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about your passion around that and working with people in a non-instructional manner.
Yeah. So I can talk about, I think I should share this story. Like when I entered the designing college, like when I thought of like specializing in industrial design in that particular institute, I realized that I had this idea about making things. But then I think in the first semester, I was introduced by college towards a community project, which was again in Hampi, which is a heritage place in Karnataka itself. So when I was doing a project, I realized like when I talk to people, when I connect to people and understand, listen to them, I feel like really good and like I really wanted to work for them. And that's how I started thinking how I can connect my learning about industrial design as well as community learning, community work together. And that's where I found a common point, that is crafts, where I can like work. So I started working in the craft sector in different communities overall during my institutional learnings.
And what does the word crafts mean generally to you? What does that bring up for you?
Yeah, so craft is to me is like a practice that is like practiced by like a group of people where they share a similar kind of process of making or use the similar medium like the material or the similar tools equipments to create something that is like like the common practice is a craft for me. So like when we met that time when I was working on a project, the like how I started was I started thinking about livelihood. I started thinking about how in an individual's life what all aspects matter other than work. Like I work to earn. Like for that matter, any artisan works to earn. But like what other aspects are there? Like the health is there, like are they really happy about working, what is there, like are they able to learn more, what excites them to work, what motivates them to do the same work, to practice that craft. Because when people see outside they might be fascinated, oh, this is this a particular piece of work is by that community and they do this thing. But my idea was what other things are affecting their livelihood. Are they really happy by doing what they are doing? Are they really getting that identity what they want to do? So that project was a kind of case study for me to like reflect on all these aspects, to have a better understanding of what all other factors really are like impacting the livelihood of an artisan.
And can anyone be an artisan? I mean, how do you define that term, artisan?
That's actually interesting in some manner, that I feel that anybody can be an artisan. In my past, all the communities that I have been working with really weren't like, like what they never had the practices like from their ancestors. They are like inheriting some kind of art or some kind of practice and that they continue. Most of them learned a new technique to do a particular work and they started working in, and that's how a group of people came together to work, and that's how these like community practices are being going on. So yeah, I think anybody can be an artisan. It's about how you learn the medium or the art to practice it.
Mm-hmm. When artisans are learning about something, or when just people in general, just anyone that wants to, learn something new, you're very interested and passionate in ways that we can do it in not an instructional manner, like people coming in from above and bringing in a manual on what to make. So how else would it go? What do you envision when you think about how people create stuff and learn how to create things?
I think so. There are two parts. One thing I would say that uh, like when we teach people that like when we introduce about any new thing, like when even about informing people who are from different backgrounds, what medium would be great for them to learn to like understand those things. So it shouldn't be like I'm coming from somewhere and I'm talking about things and they're not able to grasp it. So I think that I feel it is more understanding and talking, like it should be mutual talking and then taking it further. So the way you are imparting knowledge to them, like rather than telling them what is good, you're also telling them why that particular thing has to be done. So that way you are actually informing them to take it forward and like let them do on their own. So that's what I feel is not is like non-instructional as compared to where you go and tell them what is good, so they do it that way. But that is something that is instructional manner for me, because they might do it for smaller period, maybe a little more longer, but they won't ever forever be able to take those learnings forward
Because the why is missing.
because of the why that is being missing. Yeah.
Do you feel like that information being only available in like an academic setting is perpetuating the hierarchy?
That is definitely there. And I would say, like, not even most of the academic learnings are, defined that way. I think what our academic learnings are focusing on, who gets better grades, no matter how they are learning and what they are actually learning. It's not about why they need to learn a particular thing. It's about what they learn, what they can show to the people, okay, what they can pass the exam for. And that's what our academic learnings are also focusing on. I was like, I think I was really privileged and like really happy, blessed to go to the that kind of college where I could learn about these ideas, where I could see these kind of perspectives about like why it is important to see all these things, why it is important to introduce or learn all these kind of learnings. So I feel that in general it's missing at so many places, not only in a community or like at another like in another sectors. It's also missing in our academic educational system.
Thanks for bringing up that point. When we had talked about having people be able to choose a little bit about what it is that they want to be involved in, and finding out more about their aspirations. So how did you approach that during your thesis work?
So before my thesis project, whenever I worked, I have always realized that whenever you enter these community, people are not very like, they in the first go, I've not felt that they've been open to people like me. So so there was a barrier initially to talk to them and like to understand. So like how I started is I start talking about their lives, what are their daily practices, what time do they try to come on work, why are they working there, who like, and the best thing is to talk about their children, what are their aspirations about their children, what do they think they should do, like what they are studying, which standard, how they are able to give them that kind of education. And these kind of points actually could let me talk to them and they could open up about their daily lives. And then you talk about how the organization, wherever I have worked, like I have always gone through, like the link was with an organization. So like how the organization has helped them. And that's how they start opening up about what is benefiting them, what is not, or like what do they in general feel about the organization and the work they do.
Because you said they're sometimes not open to people like you. What do you mean people like you?
We all know that everybody has a different kind of privilege to be able to learn in different societies. So I come from a background where I have been privileged. I always like have felt that I've been privileged to get that kind of education about designing, or like at least travel and see things and understand what is there in the market, to do different studies. And I was privileged to learn all these things. When I go in these communities, and like I have also met some people in these communities that who go and tell these people, oh, this is how it should work, this is what should work, this is what should happen. And that's when these people think that these like other people come to them, people like me come to them with instructions. So they feel like, these like people are coming from privileged background and they are just telling them, instructing them. And that's when there's a barrier because of this hierarchy in the system that they are in, which somehow like makes them uncomfortable to work with people like me.
And for people that are maybe new to the understanding about like the handicraft sector, can you share a little bit more about kind of the scope of that in your context, where you're at in the world? I know it's very different from the US and from other places where people might be listening. And so I just wanted listeners to have a better understanding and a context around what does it mean when you talk about the handicraft sector in India specifically.
So I should say that like maybe I can share this, that when we used to talk about craft in older times, how craft originated was like within a community, one person is contributing, like for example, like there's a potter who does pottery, and the other person is working with metal. So how a person's like he makes pots, and these pots can be used by other people in the same community, and the person who's using metal for different things, so he might make knives to serve another people. So this is how the exchange of handcrafted things was done in back then. And that's how there were different group of people practicing a different kind of work, and that used to call a craft. And like for people, like for me, craft is that like how we create these kind of pieces that are handcrafted. While I think like, because I've been in a place and I have like talked to so many people, most of the people around me now think that handicrafts is something that is like aesthetically more good looking rather than functionality. So I think over time, this like handicrafts has taken a different image in the perspective, like the way the people think about it.
But in the way that you think about it, do you see it more along the lines of functionality? Like, is that what you're working towards, is finding systems that see that aspect and are working on that?
Definitely, especially like when we talk about like climate change, when we talk about how we should be minimal in our practices, how we should be minimal in terms of resource using and other things. I think what we should do is think about how these things can be more utilitarian rather than just aesthetically appealing. So like how we can serve a bigger agenda rather than just like decorating these things.
Well, speaking on that topic, what to you is important in a system that would create those types of crafts?
Like in crafts or in general?
In general, either way, yeah. Really, the systems thinking now. What do you think is most important?
Yeah, I think like a group of people who like work differently, who have different kind of background, maybe I can say, and have different ideas about different, like someone has an idea about health, someone might have an idea about sanitary, and all these people come together to serve each other and live together. And like someone grows food, someone practices some different practices are being happening within a single group of peoples. That's where I called it like in a system there is a chain that everybody's serving, and like all the things are happening. We talk about serving each other. I told you, like, already there's so much hierarchy in the system that people already feel that, some people come from privileged backgrounds, some people don't come from those kind of backgrounds, and there's always this hierarchy which defines people with different lifestyle status, and many more things, and these things create barriers, and that's why the system is not about serving each other. It's becoming more about who has more and who can grab more, and like who has what kind of lifestyle and who can reach to that kind of lifestyle, what is like the at the highest in the hierarchy system.
What about at some of the projects you've been involved with in your self studies, if you will? Have you found that the ideologies of maybe the founders or directors have been fully embraced by those that are creating the crafts that might be sold by that organization, or however the relationships work? What have you found there?
I think like there have been multiple scenarios with me. What I have felt is like usually when we talk about the founder of any organization, and when I've talked to them personally, I feel that they are still motivated and they still think in the same manner. Be it like the basic ideologies that the artisans are the ones who are creating, who should be given the most importance, and there are many more values that the founder of any organization comes up with. While at the same time, I felt that when people from different backgrounds and different ideas come, some of them are so disconnected with the ideology of the founder that uh, they just like dismiss what the founder's idea is, or they just in the system while working on their own, they just forget that what was the basic ideology, and what they try to do is like for either for marketing, either for like different ideas. I can give you an example. Like when I was working, like not working, I went to visit this community that creates products, and uh, I was like doing some design thinking workshops with the artisans, and I did some story narratives and all, and I did kind of introduced the color schemes to the artisans. When I went back to the organization, I talked to the designer who was working in the organization, and I told her, oh, see that this is what we could introduce. And she told me, oh, artisans are not the designers. They can't really understand what the color scheme is. Whereas I actually felt that the artisan could understand what the color scheme is. So, like, like this gap that the founder thinks something else, he's still following that, and the other people whom you meet in the organization, and they come with these kind of like, that girl thinks that she is the designer, and like she has been privileged but she to learn all these things, but she can't understand how the artisans can also learn the same thing. So these kind of things have been weird for me.
And did the founder of that organization, or just like the organization in general, say that the learning was coming from the ground up?
Yes, that's what like the founder has always like, in so many times I've always felt that the founder always feels that it's with the people. So like whatever people choose to do, whatever, like one thing I definitely understand, that when they start initially the organization or any group, when they start working, the group of people is so small, and when it grows, the gaps keep on increasing in the system. But whenever these people from outside enter the system and they come up with different ideologies and don't respect the basics, it becomes really bad for the system.
When you were going in there and you were focusing on their aspirations, and you were hearing like a lot of them were also, of course, thinking about their children and education for their children and stuff. Did you see that there was a gap, is that what you're saying, between like their livelihood needs getting met and the work that they were doing? Like, was there a gap there still? What are those livelihood aspects that really need to be looked at carefully and intentionally planned around in your perspective?
There are different, several aspects actually. First thing that everybody, like most of the artisans, said that they would like to be heard by people, especially like when there is someone at a like higher level in the system, like at the higher hierarchical system. They would like that person to hear them. So like so many people have told me that they don't interact to the person who who is directly implementing so many things, or like whose decisions are impacting their lives or like their work. So they would want them to hear. Apart from this, I think the health sector is there. As an individual, everything depends upon the work, like where they live, what they eat, what are their sanitary conditions, what are their health conditions, how all those things are being implemented, how they can think about their children future. All these things are actually impacting their life.
Something that I remember us talking about, and it's in some ways fortunate for us to be able to connect in English. Wondered a little bit about that and how you saw language also.
True. So the factor that how who all people are actually visiting that organization, or who all other people with whom these artisans interact with, uh, it's a huge gap, because most of the people who come in the organization speak English, but these artisans do want to learn English, but it's not necessary for them. They feel that when someone comes, they should be able to communicate to the people who visit the organization in Hindi. So there's this gap where they want to learn. They sometimes go, but then whenever they had workshops to learn English, they at the same time they also had work to like do. So how do they, like, they can't compromise their daily work because their daily wages will be affected. So like how can they balance that idea of how they learn these languages? And then and sometimes they feel that when everybody comes to meet them, why should they be the ones who should speak English? Or why can't there be one person who can translate whatever they say to the people who are coming from outside?
And in your experience of going around and talking with people, is there usually someone that can translate correctly for them? I mean, what does that usually look like?
I think what I have felt is the artisans are usually offended by the factor that whenever someone comes with a team of people like who are visiting the organization, these people voices are not heard, and the person who usually takes the tour tells the narratives that are in his head, and not the narratives that are by the artisans. And that's where the gap is, and that's where they feel that there's this disconnect.
Do you have any thought on why there's that disconnect?
I don't think so. Like, I'm not sure about like how this disconnect can be, like maybe like how they learn English, what are their hours, or do they really need to learn? That's still a question for me. Do they really want to learn English? I still feel that they might not really want to need to learn English. There can be like one person among them who knows English and like translates everything. So there will be a person of their own trust who does all this work. So there will be more, like they'll be more trustable, and they'll be more, the artisans will be more happy.
Obviously, having been a person from the U.S. that visited a project, like I am also one of those people that came in, only speaking English, and I'm just grappling with how do those of us that do only speak English still be able to have meaningful connections with people that are creating the products that maybe we eventually end up buying, or the spices that eventually end up in our food, or there's so many things that are coming out of other cultures into the market, that it's just, yeah, that's part of what I just wanted to talk with you more about. We don't need to have answers here, but go ahead. What were you going to say?
Yeah, no, but I think that's not just this portion. I think that's the problem in whole over India. Like there are so many languages spoken in different parts of India, and like this is the place where we met. The language that was spoken was the one that I was well aware about, and I've been brought up learning that language. Whereas I have worked in different communities where I wasn't even like I didn't know the language. So like when I used to go in that community and like the interaction point was just the gestures by hands, what we try to communicate. It was just that. So like it's a huge problem in India. It's not just like a smaller part. Everybody has a different language, and how do you bridge that gap that these different languages? And most of the people find that English is the common point, whereas some people still question why should English be the common point in India, like the common language in India.
Is that even more common than Hindi?
I think I don't know the statistics, but yeah, I feel that among my friend circle, I feel like those who are coming from different parts of India, the common language is English for us, because we don't know other different languages. One person might know 2 to 3 languages from India, but still he cannot communicate with everyone. So yeah, English is the language that we prefer to talk in.
Your thesis project title is Hindi, right?
Yeah, Samanvay.
Yeah. So would you be able to share a little bit more about the deeper sense of that word in Hindi and how you were able to incorporate this while you were doing this work?
Yeah, so Samanvay means a group of people coming together to do something, to like on a project, or like actually Samanvay means to come together to work for common good. So that's why the project was titled as Samanvay, because my idea was understanding how for livelihood different people work in a group of people, or like a group of people work in a community for a common good. So that's why it was named Samanvay. And later on when I was doing my thesis project, I had these several times where I was able to collaborate with different sections within the same organization. So like they all are people that belong to the same region geographically, but they were so segregated by the sections that they didn't want to help each other. So like what is the boundary of this group of people who are working for a particular section, and why can't they take help, and how they become like one for a for a project. Like for my project, I know that I could involve at least 3 different sections to create a single product. So that's when I felt that it's different people coming together, collaborating for common good.
When you say section, what does that mean?
I was working in the if I'm working in the wooden section, there are these sections that create textile pieces. Maybe there are sections that that have weaving section, or like these kind of different sections.
Different materials they're working with, basically.
Yeah, different materials, different kind of products producing, different techniques that they're doing.
Okay.
Collaborate with them.
And what about the sustainability factor when you're thinking about working with all these different materials? What are your thoughts on that? And also the income for the people. How is that working?
I think this is something that is a huge gap still in most of the organizations that I have visited, is that like the artisans are not aware about the sustainability. Though in their own houses they are well sustainable in their own practices because they are so minimalistic about using some resources, but when it comes for work, like I know there was this community who told me that they are sustainable, they don't use any harmful toxic chemicals or anything, and then they were using these kind of paints to paint a particular product. And I was like, what is this, and why are you painting why are you using these paints? And they told me, oh, these are not harmful for kids. And I was like, no, they are. So like that kind of awareness about what is correct and what is not is still not there. I think like the idea of sustainability also is like what are we sustainable about? Like, is it because is it the sustainable livelihood, like the longingness of the livelihood that the people are relying on the craft? Is it like going to last long, or the material that they are using is in abundance in nature, but like is the practice of using it is itself sustainable? Is the practice is minimal? So there are different organizations who have different levels of sustainability. Like some organizations do work on banana fiber, that's why I mentioned, and water hyacinth, again, that's a plant that you can get from rivers. So these organizations are thinking about sustainability in terms of using materials that are like that are in other sense waste on earth, like that are not useful for other things, so they are creating products out of it.
Do you feel that the reason for that is because of just more consciousness around like the environment, or do you think that it could tip in the other direction where now that there's so much being harvested from nature that it's no longer sustainable? I'm just kind of wondering a little bit more about like where like the connection with the people and the earth and everything comes in usually in this system thinking.
When these kind of projects started, I think they are all like 20-25 year old projects wherever I worked especially. So like all these projects started with the idea of sustaining livelihood and not really be thinking about like nature at the first point. So I don't think that when they started with these ideas, but I think over time when we hear so much about we should be sustainable in our practices, we should be minimalistic about the resources we use. Yes, people are thinking about it, and these kind of things I have always felt that it's usually like the founder or like the people who've been privileged to get these kind of awareness are going to these kind of communities, and they are able to communicate these ideas, and that's when the idea of sustainability is happening for the resources.
So it's coming from the top down, and then not everyone is
Definitely. Like, so it's interesting because when we see like in the past times, in the older times, if we see the livelihood itself for the artisans was so sustainable. Like I know that the cloth they wear on their skin, and after that they use it for the dusting, and then like it's used till it's like a complete waste. They use like every bit of any particular cloth. But now, because they've been inspired by the patterns that are followed in cities, they feel that that's good for them, and that's when they feel that maybe a piece of cloth is discarded for them. And while if we try to learn, we are going back to the roots of what they used to practice, what used to happen. And not only those people, like even when I think about how my granny used to create things out of her sari, or she still uses her sari for different packing materials. And also I feel that maybe we should learn from those ideas, and that can be the sustainable idea. But then I think that was so into people that they didn't realize that those were the ideas about sustainability that in future can be inspiration.
So speaking again on your roots, I wondered if you would share a little bit again about just like how you came to see and think about things this way, from how you were raised, because you mentioned your granny.
Yeah, true. I think there are so many more things that. So since I belong to the religion Jain, uh, like Jainism has been considered as a religion where there are like such practices that are really difficult to practice for different people. So, like the Jain priest, I've always known that they either don't wear any piece on their body or they wear only one piece, that they don't even try to wash for a longer time. When it started back then, it might seem a foolish idea to so many people that so some of them don't take, not some, most of them don't take shower for longer times. So when these ideas were there back then, they might have sounded like, a foolish idea. It was actually like, I also as a child used to sometimes make fun of these ideas, but then when I was aware about them and when I started being informed about the practices, I feel that those ideas are actually an inspiration for me today to realize to what extent can we go minimalistic to learn about these things. And then when I talk to my parents about, like when I talk to them about reducing plastic, they might not realize in day-to-day life how many times and where all they are using plastic. But then when I start telling them these examples of how a Jain priest would not use this or would consider this as to be bad, and then we also can practice the same thing, not to the fullest extent, but to some extent. That's how, like, they understand, and like there's a common understanding between my family and me that, okay, this is bad for us, this is bad for the earth, this is bad for this. And these kind of ideas are now starting to, like, come up. When people talk about empathy, I feel like listening to people about what and why is something is happening, rather than, like creating our own understanding of what is already there and be like, okay, this is because I know that there are people who have been like inspired from different lifestyles, because now the lifestyle is use and throw in so many places. And like especially in India, I know there's this trend of use and throw. Even the fashion industry that is trending nowadays so many times is about, create more products. So they make something that, so that people keep on buying, but they are not realizing people actually shouldn't be buying more. So like when I go to people, I want to listen. Like the empathy should be like when I listen to people, take inspirations and try to understand why are they talking what they are talking about, what are their ideas and what do they feel, and how do I am like how can I, like, inform them in some or the either manner about what their practices are, and try to show them the larger picture, because what they are feeling maybe like they are in a shell, and that's what, like, they're able to see a limited perspective. I think what kind of a lifestyle is actually a good lifestyle. The society in which I live, I feel that most of the people think about what is a great lifestyle, that in terms of like they have these standards that this is a lower lifestyle, this is a highest lifestyle. So what a higher lifestyle person might do is buy 5 pieces of cloth a month, while a lower standard might buy only 2 pieces of cloth in a month. So I feel like redefining these like what can be a lifestyle, what are these different status for different people, might really help people to, resolve. Once we start unfolding these ideas about what a lifestyle could be, people can understand more. Okay, like maybe these are not the things that define you in a society or your hierarchy in the society, and why do we need a hierarchy in a society that way. What should be the idea is who's being minimalistic about their practices, who's still thinking about the earth and other aspects. So like these kind of things are more informed for the people. Because there is some or the either kind of awareness. I can take the example like Diwali that just happened, like, 3 days ago, and like after knowing, like, most all the children around me are going to school, and that's in school they've been told not to burn crackers, and still they burst crackers. Like, I know for 2 days I was just listening crackers for, like, till 3 o'clock at midnight. And like, even if the children are informed, they are not really, taking things further, because I think like it's also about in the society the lifestyle thing that, who burns more crackers, what kind of, like, who can afford that much, who is buying more for their children. So once we start talking about these ideas, that maybe something can be helpful.
So it sounds like it's really like a holistic, like everyone has to be willing to look at the privilege and how their privilege is also contributing to people like aspiring for only that and consuming more and more and more of the stuff that actually is not sustainable.
True. Yeah.
So it takes a whole like community approach. And how would that word translate in Hindi, the word community? How would you translate that? And what would that meaning be there?
I think the word that I mentioned for my thesis project, Samanvay, is actually community, like a group of people working together.
For a common vision.
Good. Yeah. Like vision. Yeah. Like I feel that's what for a community word is for me. Otherwise, like you can think about a community in so many more ways. So, like, once I had this conversation with my teacher. She was talking, I used the word community in the class, and she told me, how can you use community for a group of doctors? A group of doctors are not community. So, I think the definition of community is very different for different people. So, yeah.
That's what this whole podcast is about, is learning from each other what we feel and what we think about when we think of community, and of course all working towards this new vision of living in a place where there's not this like normalized suffering for some people to have more than others.
So, yeah. So my idea of like community is where like people are not defined by like different status. They are not going for different hierarchical levels in the society, but they are thinking about the common good, and like, and not only for like, not only like human centered, but also about animals as well as for earth, like for different things that are there around them, so that they can think about many more future that like many more upcoming generation, rather than just what they have and what they want to achieve.
Yes, I'm very much on the same page with that, and that's why we connected so much.
Yeah, true.
And I'm really glad that we
True, yeah.
had this chance to get to know each other over the last, I don't know, 6-8 months since we met.
True.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners about your passion in the world and what you're working towards? Any vision you want to put out there in case somebody's listening and wants to connect with you directly? You can share now. It's up to you.
If people want to work about the like on the ideas of sustainability in a system, and like talk about bringing people together for common good, reducing inequality, if like these kind of ideas are there, like I would love to go for them, and like would love to help them, and would love to connect more people with whom I can go forward for all these kind of work. That's it. Like that's what I want to do in future for myself, I think. They can send me a mail on Megha Jain, MEGHAJAIN 0594 @gmail.com. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. It's been really great hearing your thoughts about this. I'm sure we're going to talk more about it. This is really just kind of an introduction, and this is an experiment to see who else out there listening connects with this, and who else we can bring in and talk with about this topic.
Thank you so much for like talking to me. I think this is something that like some of the things that came into my mind that I have been for so long because of you. So yeah, thank you so much.
Well, you really helped me to see things so much more clearly. So thank you so much.
Cool.
Last episode, I talked a little bit about Octavia Butler, one of my favorite authors. And I just finished reading a book by her called Parable of the Sower, which I highly recommend that everybody check out. It will have some really startling parallels between what was going on in Octavia's fictional world and what is happening in 2019, almost 2020. Including, actually in the sequel of this book, Parable of the Talents, I just started this, she has a character running for president in that book who actually uses the same statement that he was going to make America great again. And I'm sure we all at this point are familiar with who has said that. I'm not going to mention that person's name. But this book, Parable of the Sower, really made an impression on me around how we can still support each other and the importance of that belonging that we've been talking about. And then, of course, this episode's been dedicated to Samanvay and to livelihood. And so I just wanted to pose a question and give the answer that Octavia gave in the back of Parable of the Sower, the reading group guide. This is from May of 1999 when she answered this. The question was, what would you like readers to get from this novel? What would you like them to think about? And Octavia answered, I hope people who read Parable of the Sower will think about where we seem to be heading. We, the United States, even we, the human species. Where are we going? What sort of future are we creating? Is it the kind of future you want to live in? If it isn't, what can we do to create a better future, individually and in groups? What can we do? So I want to amplify Octavia's question. It's been very much on my heart the last few months since I read this book. And I wanted to put it on the microphone and just see what that sparks for you.
Wrapping up, I'd like to thank the amazing musicians that made this episode as audibly pleasure as it has been. We got to say hey to Bino Mennetti, who made us the incredible opening music on his Rolly Seaboard. Thanks, Bino and Seaboard. We miss you, and we're seeing you in Brazil, hopefully, in 2020. Also, thanks so much to Fundamental Sound Co., of course, and our producer, Taylor Greenshields. And thank you to Jazzy Robot, who's going to be taking us out of this episode, and then the musicians at Ramana's Children's Garden in Rishikesh who brought us in. Check out the show notes. That way you can hear more from these musicians and learn more about Ramana's Children's Garden if you're interested. Again, the show notes can be linked right on unifiedthreads.com, and just scroll down and you'll see them there. A side note, I do have a request for accountability from my community. I am working on putting a process in place to create transcripts for each episode. I acknowledge that this is something that needed to have been done a while back, and I am creating a system for this for each episode release going forward. Definitely is a priority for me. So just wanted to throw that out there. So if you are hearing this and you look back and you don't see transcripts, please check in and remind me. But I am hoping you will be able to see all the transcripts for people that would like to check that out, to be able to read along with the episode, or just want to read instead of listen. So we're going to let the music from Jazzy Robot take us on out. Appreciate you and be yourself. You just heard Crane Days, Golden After Loon, a special release on this podcast from Jazzy Robot. Check him out on SoundCloud, /Jazzy Robot / links in the show notes. And thanks so much for listening.